The morning was quiet in downtown San Francisco, the kind of quiet that hides a storm. Sundar Pichai, dressed in his usual simple shirt and trousers, walked into a small coffee shop on the corner of Mission Street. No one recognized him at first. To the world, he was the CEO of Google, one of the most powerful men alive. But here he looked like any other customer, carrying only a tired smile and a gentle presence. He stepped inside, the warm smell of roasted beans filling the air, mixing with the chatter of students and young workers tapping on laptops. The barista behind the counter was a young man named Evan. He had sharp eyes, restless energy, and a chip on his shoulder that could be felt from a distance. He didn't know Sundar, and he didn't care to know either. In his mind, customers were obstacles to get through, one cup at a time. Sundar waited patiently in line. He noticed the barista rushing, snapping at coworkers, and rolling his eyes whenever someone asked for something extra. Sundar thought to himself, this young man must be under pressure. I should speak kindly. When his turn came, he smiled and ordered softly, 1 black coffee, please. He spoke in his calm voice, the same voice that had inspired millions around the world. But Evan wasn't listening. Instead, he was already annoyed by how slow Sundar spoke. Is that it? Evan snapped, tapping his fingers on the counter. You don't need 10 minutes to say black coffee. A few people in line chuckled under their breath, not knowing who Sundar really was. Sundar kept smiling, unfazed. Yes, just that. Thank you, he said. He reached for his wallet, but in that moment, something shifted. Evan rolled his eyes again and muttered loudly, unbelievable. Some people think the world stops for them. It was then that Sundar noticed a deeper frustration in the young man's voice. He didn't respond. Instead, he placed his card on the counter. Evan grabbed it, swiped it roughly, and handed the receipt back without looking up. When the coffee was ready, Sundar quietly walked to pick it up. But then it happened. Evan, out of irritation and without thought, slammed the cup down. Hot coffee splashed over the counter, spilling onto Sundar's shirt. Gasps filled the room. Oops, Evan said flatly, though his smirk betrayed him. Maybe next time you won't be so slow. The entire cafe went silent. Sundar stood there, his shirt stained, his skin burning slightly from the heat. People began to whisper, some even pulling out their phones to record. To them, it looked like an ordinary man being humiliated by a rude barista. None of them knew they were witnessing the public humiliation of a man who ran one of the biggest companies in the world. Sundar took a deep breath. Anger could have risen. Pride could have shouted back. But instead, he simply nodded. Thank you for the coffee, he said softly, picking up the cup despite the mess. The whispers grew louder. Why wasn't he shouting back? Why wasn't he demanding to see the manager? Why was he so calm after such humiliation? Evan leaned back, almost enjoying the moment. What's the matter? Can't handle a little spill? Sundar looked him in the eyes. There was no anger, no hatred, only a quiet sadness. Everyone is fighting battles we cannot see, he said gently. I hope your day becomes lighter. Then he turned to leave. The room was frozen. Some felt embarrassed for Sundar. Others admired his control. But Evan laughed, shaking his head. What a fool, he muttered, loud enough for people to hear. Sundar walked out, disappearing into the street as murmurs followed him. Outside, Sundar walked slowly, his mind heavy. He wasn't thinking about the coffee or the humiliation or the stares. He was thinking about the young man. What pain had hardened him so much? What story was hidden behind that anger? But as he turned the corner, Sundar didn't know that. One of the customers inside, the girl who had filmed everything, was uploading the video online. Within minutes, it began spreading across social media. Headlines would soon follow. Barista humiliates customer by throwing coffee. What the man does next shocks everyone. And when people found out who that man really was, the story would explode. But before that storm could break, Sundar had a choice to make. Would he forget this moment and move on? Or would he return to the café and confront the truth behind Evan's anger? His phone buzzed with a message. It was from his assistant. Sir, Are you okay? A video of you just went viral. Sundar froze. His private moment of humility was no longer private. The question now was not about spilled coffee. It was about the world watching. And as Sundar looked at his phone, a quiet determination filled his heart. He whispered to himself, "This is not about me. This is about him." But he didn't know the shocking discovery waiting for him when he returned to that café. Asterisk Sundar walked slowly down the street, the morning air cool against the heat still, stinging on his shirt. He had faced boardrooms filled with critics, governments questioning him, investors pressuring him. But the silence of a stranger's cruelty always hit in a different way. Humiliation in private was one thing, but humiliation that now lived on the internet, where millions of people could replay it again and again, was something else. He knew by nightfall, the world would know what happened inside that small coffee shop. But even then, Sundar's thoughts did not circle around his own reputation. He had seen the look in Evan's eyes, that sharp mix of anger and exhaustion. It was not born in a single morning. It was the kind of heaviness that lived inside someone for years. Sundar kept asking himself, why was he so quick to lash out? What pain was he carrying that no one else could see? As his car pulled up, his driver hurried out, concerned about the stained shirt and the worried look. "Sir, should we head to the office?" the driver asked softly. Sundar paused, then shook his head. "Not yet. Take me back to the cafe." The driver's eyes widened in surprise, but he said nothing. Sundar had made up his mind. Back inside the coffee shop, the air was heavier than before. People whispered, their phones buzzing as the video spread even further. Evan was still behind the counter, his jaw tight, his movements sharper. When Sundar walked in again, a hush fell across the room. Some customers looked at him with pity, others with curiosity, while Evan's face hardened into disbelief. "You came back?" Evan muttered under his breath, almost mocking. "What? You didn't get enough the first time?" Sundar didn't raise his voice. He stood calmly at the counter, his shirt still damp, his presence unnerving in its gentleness. "I came back because I think you're hurting," he said quietly. "And hurting people often hurt others." The words hit the air like a bell, sharp yet soft. The cafe was silent again. Evan's face flushed red, his fists clenching. "Don't pretend you know anything about me," he snapped. "You don't know what it's like to work here for minimum wage, to be treated like trash every day, to wonder if you'll even make rent this month." His voice cracked, not with anger alone, but with something deeper. Sundar listened carefully, his eyes softening. "You're right," he admitted. "I don't know your life, but I know what it feels like to be underestimated, ignored, and spoken to as if you don't matter." He paused, remembering his own struggles years ago, back in India, when he stood in long lines just to use a phone. When people dismissed his quiet nature, when he had almost nothing but dreams. A woman sitting near the window whispered to her friend, "Wait, that's Sundar Pichai. Isn't he the CEO of Google?" Gasps spread like wildfire across the cafe. Phones lifted higher, cameras recording again. People who had laughed at Sundar earlier now realized the truth. Evan froze. The color drained from his face. You're him?" he stammered, his voice shaking. The arrogance that had fueled his actions earlier crumbled under the weight of sudden recognition. He looked around, realizing the world was watching, not just through the phones in the cafe, but through millions of screens online. But Sundar didn't use the moment to strike back. He didn't demand an apology, didn't call the manager, didn't humiliate Evan in return. Instead, he spoke with a steady voice. "Who I am doesn't matter right now. What matters is that you're carrying something heavy. I can see it in your eyes." The cafe was no longer a coffee shop. It had become a stage, every ear tuned, every eye watching. Evan swallowed hard, his hands trembling. Part of him wanted to shout again, to push back, to cover his shame with anger. But another part, the part he had buried for years, wanted to collapse and admit the truth. Before he could speak, a loud buzz filled Sundar's pocket. His phone vibrated with call after call, message after message. His assistant's voice came through urgently. Sir, the video has already crossed 1 million views. The press is calling. Everyone wants to know your response. Sundar closed his eyes for a moment, steadying himself. He knew the world was pulling him away, demanding a reaction, waiting for a headline. But his gaze stayed on Evan. He wasn't done here. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice so only Evan could hear, though the entire café strained to listen. If you want me to walk away and leave you alone, I will. But if you want someone to listen, truly listen, I'm here. Evan's chest rose and fell quickly. For the first time, the sharpness in his eyes began to break. He opened his mouth to speak, but then the door to the cafe burst open. A woman rushed in, her face pale, her breath ragged as though she had run blocks to get here. She looked directly at Evan, tears streaming down her cheeks. Evan, she cried out, her voice cracking. It's your brother. He collapsed. He's in the hospital. The room erupted in shock. Evan dropped the cup in his hand, coffee splattering on the floor. He staggered back, his hands on his head, his whole body trembling. Sundar stood still, his eyes narrowing with quiet concern. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to reveal themselves, but this was only the beginning of a truth deeper than Sundar could have imagined. The cafe fell into complete silence after the woman's words. Only the sound of the cup shattering on the floor and the hiss of the espresso machine in the background filled the room. Evan stood frozen, his face pale, his hands trembling uncontrollably. His mother's voice echoed in his mind, her cries, from countless phone calls about his younger brother's worsening health. He had been ignoring them, pretending that work and bitterness were enough to shield him from reality. But reality had now crashed through the cafe doors in front of everyone. Sundar watched quietly, his eyes not judging, but full of concern. He saw not just a rude barista, but a young man drowning under invisible weight. Humiliation, anger, and pride had been only the surface beneath it. There was fear. What happened? Sundar asked softly, his voice breaking through the heavy silence. The woman, still gasping for breath, looked around at the strangers recording on their phones, her cheeks streaked with tears. He collapsed at work. They rushed him to General Hospital, to doctors. They don't know if he'll make it. Evan's knees weakened, and for a moment it looked as if he might fall. His co-workers, the same ones he had snapped at earlier, stepped forward to hold him steady. His mask of arrogance was gone now, replaced by raw panic. I need to go, Evan stammered, his voice breaking. He grabbed his apron and tore it off, his chest heaving. I need to see him. He turned to rush out the door, but then his eyes caught Sundar's. The same man he had mocked, humiliated, and spilled coffee on only minutes ago, now stood like an anchor of calm in a storm. Sundar stepped forward. Do you need a ride? The question stunned not just Evan, but everyone inside the cafe. The cameras kept recording, the audience both in the shop and online glued to the unfolding scene. Evan's lips parted as if to protest, but no sound came out. Finally, he gave the smallest nod, too weak to speak. Sundar gently placed a hand on his shoulder and guided him outside. The streets were buzzing, whispers following them as they stepped into the waiting car. The driver looked at Sundar through the mirror, unsure of what to say. Sundar gave a simple instruction. General Hospital, quickly. As the car sped through the city, Evan sat with his hands covering his face. His breath came in shallow bursts, guilt and fear mixing in his chest like fire. He whispered, almost to himself, he's only 19. He can't leave like this. Sundar listened, his heart tightening. Your brother? Michael, Evan said through broken words. He's all I have left. Our parents passed when we were kids. I raised him. I tried to do everything for him, but I couldn't keep up. Rent, bills, food. I work here every day, but it's never enough. He's been sick for months, but I thought if I just kept working, things would get better. Tears spilled down his face. And for the first time, he wasn't a barista with a sharp tongue. He was just a brother, terrified of losing the only family he had. Sundar's mind drifted to his own childhood in India. He remembered how his parents sacrificed everything, how his mother stretched every coin, how his father carried silent burdens no one else saw. He remembered the fear of not knowing if the future would ever be secure. The empathy in him deepened, not as a CEO, not as a public figure, but as a human being who understood what it meant to fight silently. The car pulled up to the hospital. Flashing lights, rushing nurses, and the smell of antiseptic filled the air as they hurried inside. Evan rushed to the reception desk, his voice shaking as he asked for Michael. The nurse pointed them toward the emergency wing. When they reached the corridor, a doctor emerged, his face grim. "Are you family?" He asked. "Yes," Evan said quickly, his voice trembling. The doctor sighed. He collapsed due to severe exhaustion and complications from untreated pneumonia. "We've stabilized him for now, but the truth is his condition has worsened because he didn't get proper treatment earlier. The hospital bills will be high. We'll do what we can, but he needs long-term care." The words crashed into Evan like thunder. His body shook as he whispered, "But I can't even pay this month's rent. How am I supposed to?" His voice broke completely, his sobs echoing down the hall. Sundar stood beside him, silent, listening, absorbing. He could see the stares from nurses and patients who were beginning to recognize him now. They whispered his name, some in disbelief. Yet Sundar ignored it all. His eyes were fixed on Evan, on the truth of human struggle in its rawest form. In that moment, he made a decision, not as a CEO, but as a man who believed in kindness above power. He placed a hand on Evan's back and spoke softly, "Let me help." Evan's head shot up, eyes red and swollen. Why? Why would you help me? After everything I did to you this morning. After the way I treated you." His voice was sharp, desperate, almost angry. Sundar met his gaze, steady and calm. "Because pain doesn't erase kindness. Because someone once helped me when I didn't deserve it. And because right now your brother needs hope more than anything else." The corridor went still. Evan stared at him, torn between pride and desperation. His heart screamed to refuse, but his brother's life screamed louder. Finally, he nodded weakly, whispering, "Please, help him." Sundar gave a small nod in return. But deep inside, he knew this was not just about paying bills. There was a deeper story, a root cause to the suffering that money alone could not fix. And he intended to uncover it. Just as he was about to speak again, a nurse rushed toward them, panic in her voice. "Doctor, his condition is dropping code blue in room 12. The sound of alarms filled the corridor. Evan's face drained of color as he realized they were talking about Michael. The doors burst open, doctors and nurses rushing inside. Evan tried to push forward, but the nurse held him back. "Please, stay here." Sundar gripped Evan's arm firmly, holding him steady as chaos erupted in front of them. Inside the room, they could see Michael's small frame, wires and machines surrounding him, his life hanging in the balance. The hallway filled with noise, shouts, and rushing footsteps. But to Evan and to Sundar standing beside him, everything slowed to silence. Was this the end? Or was this the moment that would change everything? The hospital corridor pulsed with chaos. Alarms echoed from room 12, voices collided, and the metallic scent of urgency clung to the air. Doctors and nurses rushed in and out, calling for medication, shouting numbers, fighting to keep Michael's fragile body alive. Through the small glass window, Evan saw his younger brother lying still on the bed, his chest struggling to rise, his skin pale like paper. "Let me in," Evan shouted, his voice cracking under the weight of panic. He tried to push past the nurse, but his arms were weak, trembling. The nurse shook her head firmly, blocking his path. "Sir, please, you can't go in right now. Let the team work." Evan collapsed back against the wall, his knees folding under him. Tears poured freely down his face as he buried his head in his hands. "He's all I have," he whispered, his voice muffled, raw, and breaking apart. "I can't lose him too." Sundar crouched beside him, placing a steady hand on his shoulder. His own heart was heavy, each beat echoing with memories of the times he had stood helpless while others he loved suffered. He remembered his mother's worn face, his father's quiet sacrifices, the countless moments when hope seemed distant. He knew that fear, the kind that eats through your chest when someone you love hovers between life and death. "Listen to me," Sundar said softly, his calm voice cutting through the noise. "Your brother is not alone in that room. A whole team is fighting for him, and he needs you strong out here. He needs you ready when he opens his eyes." Evan lifted his head, eyes swollen, face twisted with grief and guilt. "But what if he doesn't open his eyes?" he asked, his voice trembling like glass on the edge of shattering. Sundar looked at him steadily. And for the first time that day, his voice carried a firmness that demanded attention. "Then you will make sure he knows you never gave up on. And not for a single second." The words sank deep into Evan's chest, piercing through layers of fear and pride. He stared at Sundar, realizing that the man beside him wasn't just speaking like a stranger. He was speaking like someone who had lived through storms of his own, someone who carried scars invisible to the world, thought minutes dragged down like hours. The alarms inside the room finally faded into softer beeps. The doors opened, and the doctor stepped out, pulling his mask down. His face carried exhaustion, but also a glimmer of relief. "He's stable for now," the doctor said, his voice calm but firm. "We managed to bring him back, but this is temporary. His lungs are weak and his body is fragile. He needs long-term treatment, rest, and care that goes beyond what the hospital alone can provide. Without it, the chances of another collapse are very high." Evan nodded quickly, hope and fear tangled in his chest. "Thank you, doctor." "Thank you," he whispered. Then, almost immediately, his face twisted again with dread. He knew what the doctor's words meant: money. Money he didn't have. Money he couldn't even dream of. Asterisk. As the doctor walked away, Evan turned to Sundar, his lips trembling, his pride fighting every word. "They're right. He needs treatment, but I can't pay for it. I couldn't even pay for the medicine he needed before. I thought if I worked more shifts, I could fix everything, but I was wrong. And now he's suffering because of me." His voice cracked, heavy with guilt. Sundar leaned closer, his tone calm but unwavering. "This isn't your fault. You did everything you could with what you had. But sometimes, no matter how hard we fight, we can't carry everything alone." Evan shook his head, his eyes wild with shame. "Why are you even helping me? I treated. You're like dirt. I humiliated you in front of everyone. Why don't you hate me? Why don't you walk away?" Sundar's face softened, and for the first time, a faint smile tugged at his lips. "Because I've learned something in life. People are not their worst moments. People are the battles they survive, the weight they carry, the love they hold in their hearts, even when it hurts. I don't see the man who threw coffee at me. I see the brother who would do anything to save his family." The words broke something inside Evan. His shoulders shook as sobs tore through him, raw and unfiltered. The walls he had built, anger, sarcasm, cruelty crumbled. And beneath it all was a young man who had been alone for far too long. In that quiet, heavy moment, Sundar made another decision. He would not just pay the bills. He would step into this family story, no matter how messy, no matter how complicated. He stood and placed a hand on Evan's back. "Let me take care of the hospital costs. Your brother deserves a chance to heal without the shadow of debt crushing him." Evan looked up in disbelief, his mouth opening and closing without words. His pride screamed to refuse, but his love for Michael screamed louder. Finally, tears rolling down his cheeks, he whispered, "If you do this, I'll owe you everything." Sundar shook his head gently. "No, you'll owe it to your brother to live differently, to rise above the anger. That has been eating you alive." If you accept this, promise me you'll honor it by changing. Evan swallowed hard, nodding slowly, his chest heavy with both relief and fear. But before he could respond, a voice cut through the hallway. It wasn't the doctor this time. It was a group of reporters pushing their way in, cameras flashing, microphones raised. Mr. Pichai, is it true you were humiliated at a café this morning? Is this the young man in the viral video? Why are you here with him? The hospital corridor erupted with noise. Patients, nurses, and reporters crowded around. Evan's face burned with shame, realizing the world was now watching, not just his mistake, but his brother's suffering. Sundar stepped forward, shielding him instinctively from the flashing lights. His jaw tightened, his mind racing. He knew anything he said right now would spread everywhere across news outlets, social media, and boardrooms. This wasn't just about him anymore. This was about Evan, about Michael, about what story the world would be told. Sundar took a deep breath, his voice steady but powerful. This is not about me. This is about a young man and his brother fighting for their lives. And if the world is watching, then let the world learn what kindness can do. The cameras clicked even faster, the questions pouring in louder. Evan stood frozen, his heart pounding. He had been exposed before the entire world. But now the question loomed heavier than ever. Would Sundar's kindness truly change his life? Or would the weight of shame and public attention destroy what little hope he had left? Asterisk, the hospital corridor was no longer just a place of healing. It had turned into a battlefield of flashing cameras and restless voices. Microphones shoved forward, lenses zoomed in, and questions cut through the air like knives. The reporters smelled blood, an international headline born from humiliation. Kindness and scandal all tangled together. Even shrank back against the wall, his body trembling. Shame burned through him as strangers shouted his name, demanding answers he could not give. Are you the barista from the viral video? Do you have anything to say about how you treated Sundar Pichai? Do you feel guilty now that he's saving your brother's life? Every question was another stab, another reminder of how low he had fallen. In one morning, he had gone from invisible barista to the face of cruelty broadcasted worldwide. His brother's suffering, his own mistakes, his private despair, now all of it was fuel for the world's gossip. Sundar stepped forward, shielding Evan from the mob with a quiet but commanding presence. He raised a hand, his calm gaze silencing even the loudest voices. Enough, he said softly, yet firmly. This is not a circus. This is a hospital. Respect the people inside these walls. The room stilled, as if even the cameras knew to hesitate. Sundar continued, his words deliberate. I am not here as a CEO. I am not here as a public figure. I am here as a human being who saw another human being in pain. If you want a headline, write this. Kindness is not weakness. Forgiveness is not foolishness. And every life, no matter how small it seems to the world, matters. The weight of his words filled the corridor. Some reporters lowered their cameras, ashamed. Others kept filming, but with a new expression. As if unsure whether they were recording a scandal or a lesson, Evan stared at Sundar in disbelief. Moments ago, he had expected anger, humiliation, maybe even revenge. Instead, Sundar had chosen to lift him higher when the world wanted to tear him apart. His throat tightened, his chest heavy. Why are you doing this for me? He whispered, almost choking on the words. Sundar glanced at him gently. Because one day, someone will need you to stand for them. And in that moment, you'll remember how it feels to be given another chance. The words sank deep, carving themselves into even soul. A nurse approached them quietly, leaning close to Evan. Your brother is asking for you, she said. Softly. He's awake. Evan's heart jolted. Without hesitation, he rushed down the hall, Sundar walking behind him. They entered the dimly lit hospital room where Michael lay weak but conscious, tubes in his arms, his chest rising and falling unevenly. His eyes fluttered open, and when they landed on his brother, they filled with tears. Evan. Michael's voice was a whisper, fragile as glass. Evan collapsed at his bedside, grabbing his hand tightly. I'm here, Mike, I'm here. You scared me so bad. I thought I lost you. His voice broke into sobs. Michael gave a faint smile. You didn't lose me. Not yet. Then his gaze shifted towards Sundar, standing quietly near the doorway. Is that? Evan wiped his eyes quickly, nodding. Yeah, he's the man. I hurt this morning, and he's the one helping us now. Michael's weak smile grew. Then maybe the world isn't as cruel as it feels. Those words stabbed into Evan's chest. His brother, the one who had collapsed because of years of poverty and neglect, still had the strength to find hope. Evan's shame deepened, but alongside it, a spark of determination lit inside him. As the hours passed, Sundar stepped out to make calls, quietly arranging for Michael's treatment to be fully covered. He didn't announce it, didn't boast. He simply ensured that the bills were no longer chains around their necks. Outside, the world kept spinning. Social media exploded with debates. Some praised Sundar's grace, calling him a symbol of humility and kindness. Others mocked Evan, branding him the face of ungratefulness. Memes spread, articles poured in, hashtags trended. The story had left the cafe and entered every living room, every office, every conversation around the globe. By evening, Evan scrolled through his phone with trembling hands, reading thousands of comments about himself. Every word cut deeper than the last. Monster. Bully. Disgrace. Doesn't deserve help. He wanted to throw the phone away, to disappear. Don't read them, Sundar said quietly, sitting beside him. The world will always talk, but their words don't define you. What you do from this moment forward will. Evan turned to him, his eyes desperate. But how do I erase what I did? How do I undo the damage? Sundar's gaze was steady, his voice calm. You don't erase it, you rise from it. Mistakes don't destroy us unless we refuse to change. The words lingered, but Evan's heart still wrestled. He wanted to believe, but the weight of shame pressed hard. He leaned back against the chair, whispering, I don't know if I'm strong enough. Sundar looked at him for a long moment. Strength isn't about never falling. It's about standing up when you do. Asterisk. Before Evan could respond, the door to the room creaked open. A hospital administrator stepped inside, holding a folder. His expression was serious, his tone firm. Mr. Pichai, we need to talk. It's about the arrangements you've made for this young man's brother. There's a complication. Sundar stood slowly, his face calm but curious. What complication? The administrator sighed, glancing between Sundar and Evan. There are legal issues. The brother is still a minor in some aspects of his care, and debts have already been transferred. To collections? If we proceed without resolving those issues, it could trigger an investigation. And given the media attention surrounding all this, his voice trailed off heavily. Evan's stomach dropped. His mind raced with panic. What does that mean? Are they going to take him away? Are they going to stop treatment? The administrator's silence was answer enough. Asterisk. Sundar's jaw tightened, his calm eyes flickering with determination. The storm was not over. If anything, it was only beginning. Asterisk. The administrator's words hung in the air like a shadow, pressing down on everyone in the room. Evan's heart sank, his breath quick and shallow. It felt as though the floor had collapsed beneath him. He clutched the side of the chair, his knuckles white, his mind screaming with panic. You can't just stop his treatment, he said, his voice breaking. He'll die if you do. The administrator looked uncomfortable, but firm. I'm not saying we'll stop care. But legally, with the debts transferred and given the media attention, the hospital is under scrutiny. Any irregular action could put us in serious risk. We need a proper resolution before moving forward. Evan turned desperately to Sundar, his eyes wide with fear, his voice trembling. Please don't let them do this. He's my brother. He's all I have. Sundar placed a steady hand on Evan's shoulder, his presence grounding him. I won't let him slip through the cracks, he said softly. Then he faced the administrator with calm authority. Tell me exactly what needs to be done. Every paper, every legal issue, every debt, I'll handle it. The administrator hesitated, Mr. Pichai, this could involve more than money. The collections agencies may resist, and given your public image, any wrong move could create a scandal. Sundar's eyes did not waver. Then let them see a scandal of kindness. The administrator blinked, stunned into silence. After a long pause, he nodded reluctantly and walked away, leaving Sundar and Evan alone once more. The room fell quiet, broken only by the weak beeps of Michael's monitors. Evan's hands shook as he buried his face in them. "Why are you doing this for me?" He whispered again, his voice raw with disbelief. "I don't deserve it. I hurt you. I humiliated you. And now the world sees me as nothing but a monster." Sundar leaned forward, his voice gentle but powerful. "Listen to me, Evan. The world may only see your mistake, but I see your humanity. I see the brother who works endless shifts just to keep a roof over his sibling's head. I see the pain that turned into anger because you didn't know where else to put it. You are not defined by the worst thing you've done. You are defined by what you do next." Evan's tears spilled freely, his chest heaving. No one had ever spoken to him that way. Not with pity, not with scorn, but with belief. Belief in someone who had given no reason to be believed in. As the night deepened, Sundar stayed at the hospital. He spoke with lawyers, arranged payments, and quietly ensured that Michael's future care would be secure. He didn't issue press statements or take credit. Instead, he sat by Michael's bedside, listening to his weak but hopeful words, and beside Evan, guiding him through waves of despair. In the morning, the story exploded worldwide. Newspapers and television stations didn't just report a scandal, they reported a lesson. CEO forgives humiliation, saves barista's brother. Headlines carried Sundar's words about kindness and forgiveness, echoing across continents. Millions debated the story, some praising, some mocking, but none could ignore it. By afternoon, offers poured in. Charities reached out to support Michael. Strangers donated money. People who had once hurled insults at Evan online now sent messages of encouragement, inspired by Sundar's example. But the most powerful change did not happen outside in the world. It happened inside Evan. He sat by his brother's bed, his hand wrapped around Michael's frail fingers. "I'm sorry, Mike," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I let my anger make me cruel. I thought the world was against me, so I fought everyone, even the ones who didn't deserve it. I won't do that anymore. I promise you, from now on, I'll be better. I'll honor the chance we've been given." Michael smiled weakly, his eyes glassy but bright. "That's all I ever wanted, for us to have hope." Sundar, sitting quietly nearby, watched with a soft expression. He knew promises were fragile, but in that moment he believed in Evan's words. He believed because he had seen the breaking of pride, the birth of humility, the spark of transformation. Days turned into weeks. Michael's condition improved steadily under proper care. Evan began volunteering at the hospital, helping other families who were drowning in the same struggles he once faced. He didn't do it for attention, and he didn't do it for redemption. He did it because Sundar's words echoed in him every day. You are defined by what you do next. But the story didn't fade. It grew into something larger. People around the world began to share their own stories of forgiveness, of helping strangers, of breaking cycles of anger. Hashtags turned into movements. Kindness became a conversation people could no longer dismiss. One evening, weeks later, Evan approached Sundar outside the hospital. The sun was setting, painting the sky with deep orange and gold. Evan's voice was steady but filled with emotion. "I don't know how to thank you. You didn't just save my brother. You saved me. You showed me a version of myself I didn't believe existed." Sundar looked at him, his calm smile as humble as ever. "Don't thank me. Live it. Show the world that one act of kindness can change a life, then pass it forward." Evan nodded, his eyes glistening. He extended his hand, this time not with arrogance, not with mockery, but with respect. Sundar shook it firmly. And for the first time, the barista who once threw coffee in anger now stood as a man holding hope in his heart. As they parted ways, Sundar walked down the quiet street, his figure blending into the crowd like any other man. No cameras, no microphones, no spotlight, just a simple man who believed that kindness was the most powerful force of all. The world kept buzzing with stories of power, wealth, and scandal. But somewhere in a small hospital room, a young man healed, a brother transformed, and a lesson rippled across humanity that forgiveness is not weakness, and humility is not silence, it is strength in its purest form. And though millions had watched the viral video for its shock value, they stayed for the story that followed. A story that whispered to every heart, if Sundar Pichai could forgive the one who humiliated him, what excuse do we have not to forgive each other? The story did not end in that hospital. It lived on in every person who chose kindness over cruelty, compassion over pride, love over anger. And Evan, once a symbol of shame, became proof that people could change. All because one man chose to see his humanity instead of his mistake.